Good morning, and thank you for joining me for Thursday's edition. I don't even know what day of the week it is anymore. Thursday's edition of Everything Yesterday This Morning. FYI, for those of you tuning in, this is actually take two. This is my second recording of the day because the first one only captured 6 minutes of the 18 minutes, and I'm going to try to cut it down a little bit the second time. So, anyway, these dark circles and puffy eyes that you see, that is the wonderful result of Russia officially launching its full-scale invasion into Ukraine. The attack came by land, sea, and air. Prior to launching his invasion, Putin released a statement saying, quote, "To anyone who would consider interfering from the outside, if you do, you will face consequences greater than any you have ever faced in history. All relevant decisions have been taken. I hope you hear me." Now, this threat should come as no surprise to anyone, considering that 2 weeks ago, Putin stood on stage with Emmanuel Macron. Y'all, I'm even better at 4 o'clock in the morning than I am right now. Said, "I want you to listen to me, really listen to me, and put this on your televisions and in your newspapers and on your media. You don't want a war, and I don't want a war. But I do have pretty advanced nuclear capabilities, and the cost to both of us would be great." Now, I'm paraphrasing that, but this isn't something that anyone shouldn't have seen. Certainly not our people running our military and our administration. They should have been very well aware of what his intentions were, should anyone interfere with what he wanted to do moving forward. This headline and the situation is going to absolutely dominate your news today. I'm not going to dedicate a significant amount of time to this. Think back, though, to our Fortune article that I discussed with you guys yesterday. No war, little war, big war. This, in my opinion, will be determined to be a big war. You will be made to sacrifice for someone else's freedom, and that cost will probably first be seen when you next fill up your gas tank for your vehicle. Oil surged to $100 a barrel for the first time since 2014, and European natural gas soared 30% after last night's attack. This was predictable, and now all eyes should be on Taiwan. That is Reuters. Moving into the Taiwan conversation, China's foreign ministry said that Taiwan is not Ukraine and has always been part of China amid Taiwanese president's calls to ramp up vigilance on military activities in response to the crisis in Ukraine. Specifically, Hua said, "Taiwan is not Ukraine. Taiwan has always been an inalienable part of China. This is an indisputable legal and historical fact, just like Tibet," right? Taiwanese President Tsai noted, "In the face of foreign forces intending to manipulate the situation in Ukraine and affect the morale of Taiwanese society, all government units must strengthen the prevention of cognitive warfare launched by foreign forces and local collaborators." That was another Reuters article. I'm telling y'all, don't sleep on China. This is going to hurt us from a gas perspective with the Ukraine-Russia situation. It's going to devastate us if China takes over Taiwan. Cummins unveiled a combustion engine that could run on any fuel. Without diving into the ethics or sustainability of the mining necessary to create electric vehicles, that wave is upon us. Prior to that becoming the only option, though, Cummins has come out with a combustion agnostic engine, meaning that it can burn any type of fuel, including hydrogen. They designed an optimized combustion chamber for fuel mixing, charging motion, and turbulence generation in the engine. So everything below I guess like the pistons, everything below that is standard across the board. Every single one of the engines are fitted the same way. Above that, though, it's determined based off of what type of fuel it's burning. So I will say that you can tell, like, whoever wrote this article has strong opinions that electric should be the way to go and is the way of the future. But I do think that this should be applauded for an effort on the combustion engine side to try to come up with cleaner options while still maintaining that, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Cummins also has a special place in my heart. My uncle, who ended up being the CEO of Porsche, got his start in Cummins and kind of turned around their engine sales. So I just, it has a special place, and I kind of wish that he was alive so he and I could have this conversation. Fighter jets scrambled in response to an orb that was spotted over Kauai, Hawaii. According to a local media report, the incident occurred last Monday afternoon, and a dude named Abe Kowitz photographed the object. They said it looked like a bright star, but it was odd because it was in the middle of the day. And then they saw two F-22 fighter jets scramble to check out the object. The Major General Kenneth Hara offered an official explanation for the incident. In regards to aerial activity over Kauai, Indo-Pacific Command detected a high-altitude object floating in the air in the vicinity of the Hawaii Islands. In accordance with Homeland Defense procedures, Pacific Air Forces launched tactical aircraft to intercept and identify the object. And it was an unmanned balloon with no identification markings. I suppose those who were hoping for the alien invasion will be disappointed, but it was good to know that the military observation to response time was minimal. I do think it's interesting that there was such a large object that was over Hawaii, but we'll see what that actually turns out to be. Coast to Coast AM is who covered that. The top two prosecutors investigating the Trump organization have resigned. Carrie Dunn, who championed the legal fight to get access to Trump's tax records at the Supreme Court and won twice, has left the office along with Mark Pomerantz, which he's a former mafia prosecutor who was recruited out of private practice to come help with the situation because of his expertise in white-collar crime. He was recruited by Vance, who is the former DA, to help lead that investigation. The spokesperson for the current DA, Alvin Bragg, said, quote, "We're grateful for their service and the investigation is ongoing." Now, the New York Times cited two sources indicating that Bragg was backing away from the investigation and had paused grand jury testimony, which was followed by these resignations. Trump has not been charged with any wrongdoing in the case and has called the investigation a witch hunt. This next subject, I'm actually super pissed off about it, to be honest with you. I'm trying really hard not to cuss on this, but it's very difficult sometimes. So if you know, or if you've listened to my podcast, I originally started based off of the 1,000 Talents Plan. My very first episode covers a report that was given to the Senate in 2019 that disclosed the amount of money and the amount of individuals who have been collecting taxpayer resources while working for China and then giving that research and that data over to them. So the United States is ending the Trump era program that targets threats posed by China. The Department of Justice is ending the program, specifically fighting Chinese espionage, and intellectual property theft, shifting from what the officials are calling a myopic focus to address threats from a broader array of hostile nations. Critics have said that the former policy resulted in racial discrimination and has, quote, chilled scientific research. Matt Olson, who is the Assistant Attorney General for the National Security Division, said that the approach was too narrow and focus will expand to include countries like China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, and will be, quote, threat-driven. If you've paid attention, 20 academic researchers have faced charges as participating in the 1,000 Talents Plan, but several cases have been dismissed due to premise. So if you go back, and I encourage you, I mean, if you're following me here, go listen to one of my podcast episodes. The very first one, there are no measures in place for vetting, certainly not from a governmental perspective. The expectation is that these universities and these research institutions will be the ones to actually do the investigation. The problem with that is if they're accepting money from China as well, they have no vested interest in doing anything other than turning a blind eye to the situation. So I have a really, really hard time with us now saying, okay, Well, we're going to expand this. Well, you weren't doing a good fucking job when we were focused on one country. Now you're looking at 4 and it's only going to be threat driven. So as long as taxpayers are paying for it and China's paying for it, you don't care where the research goes, just as long as they're not doing anything bad with it. And that's interesting when we're funding. Anyway, I'm going to stop because I'm just going to rant for like the next 30 minutes. That was a Reuters article. Justin Trudeau has revoked the emergency powers. The Canada blockades have ended. Just as the American convoy is beginning to reach Washington, D.C. for Biden's State of the Union address, Justin Trudeau has announced he is removing the emergency powers that police can use. The situation is no longer an emergency. Therefore, the federal government will be ending the use of the Emergencies Act. We're confident that existing laws and bylaws are sufficient to keep people safe. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police said that those who had their bank accounts frozen were, quote, influencers in the illegal protest in Ottawa and owners and or drivers of vehicles who did not want to leave the area, which I find that to be interesting. You should look into some of the attorneys that are defending individuals who have had their bank accounts frozen. The next part of this article, though, is telling. It states the protests, which were first aimed at COVID-19 vaccine mandates for cross-border truckers, but also encompassed a fury over the range of restrictions and hatred for Trudeau, reflected the spread of disinformation in Canada and simmering populist and right-wing anger. The self-styled Freedom Convoy shook Canada's reputation for civility. Inspired convoys in France, New Zealand, and the Netherlands interrupted trade, causing economic damage on both sides of the border. Hundreds of trucks occupied the streets in a display that was part protest, part carnival. Well, either it was so dangerous and so awful that we had to freeze people's assets, or it was part protest, part carnival. And I have a friend, he went and live streamed multiple times with me. There are that I have personally seen, there's no footage that shows any sort of violence or anything like that. But we were unsafe and uncivil. I say we. At this point, I feel like I'm Canadian. And they were more torn up about 3 weeks worth of honking than they have been 2 years of government oppression, escalating and crescendoing at the point where they're actually freezing your funds and you can't use your bank accounts. That's ridiculous. The United States Postal Service has finalized a plan to replace their fleet with 90% gas-powered vehicles, 10% battery. After the White House objected to the move and asked for further study of the impact of emissions, the Postmaster General indicated that the post office does not have the funding available to increase the number of electric vehicles in its fleet. The director of the EPA has said the plan is inconsistent with clean energy policies at state, federal, and international levels and called it a crucial lost opportunity to more rapidly reduce the carbon footprint of one of the largest government fleets in the world. Of note, Adrian Martinez, who is the senior attorney at the environmental law group Earth Justice, said that environmental groups will pursue litigation to get the United States Postal Service to reverse course. The Postmaster's environmental review is rickety, founded on suspect calculations, and fails to meet the standards of the law. We're not done fighting this reckless decision, he said. And I think it's interesting. It says the international levels. This is inconsistent with international levels. I tell you what, why don't you reach out to our international partners and tell them to donate the funds necessary for our non-revenue generating postal service to have electric vehicles in their fleet? Go ahead, reach out to France, Germany, England, all of these countries who think that we should have electric vehicles. Tell them to pony up the money and tax their citizens so that we can have our postal service with electric vehicles. I'm cool with that. Go for it. The last article that I want to share with you guys, this is science meets philosophy. I think this is kind of cool. New data from a scientific accident has suggested that life may actually flash before our eyes as we die. A team of scientists we're measuring the brain waves of an 87-year-old patient who had developed epilepsy. During their recording, he actually suffered a fatal heart attack, and that offered an unexpected recording of a dying brain. It revealed that in the 30 seconds before and after, the man's brainwaves followed the same patterns as dreaming or recalling memories. This could suggest that a final recall of life may occur in the last moments. It continued 30 seconds after the patient's heart stopped beating, which, in my opinion, kind of raises that philosophical question: when does life end? When the heart stops or when the brain stops functioning? Science meeting philosophical questions is always fun. There's a study from 2013 that's referenced in this article where the same thing is true of rats, that their brain maintains functionality for close to 30 seconds after the heart stops beating. So, maybe we get to replay, and whether those are good memories or bad, we don't know. And, there's nothing scientific saying, okay, this is what's happening, but the same parts of your brain are triggered in that moment. So I think that's kind of a cool thing. As always, I cut it by 2 minutes, the second round. Okay, as always, I love you guys. Subscribe, like, share, do all that crazy shit that helps me eventually get monetized. I appreciate all of you. Stay safe out there. Get some gas. Have a good life or a good day. I'll see you tomorrow.